Welcome back to part 2 of our What If Naruto Was Reborn as Itachi's Younger Sister scenario. Continuing with the brilliant story crafted by Lily1478, if you have not watched part 1, then please watch the part 1 given in the description. I humble request you to support me to reach 1000 subscribers as soon as possible. My friend, I need your support. Please support me. Let's start this video. Yumiya waited for the blinding light of death to consume her, but it never came. Instead, the abyss spat her back into consciousness, blessing her with a coughing fit and torso deep in a cold river. I'm alive? She blinked rapidly, the sun shining in her eyes with the sounds of trickling water and the rustle of trees surrounding her. Her body throbbed terribly, shivering as the autumn wind bit at her. She could hardly lift her head from the shore, so she continued to lay there, her cheek pressed into the mud. With her limited view, she could see that she was in a forest's riverbank and that it was early morning. The bank was shallow with different shapes of mossy rocks. The river water was so clear that she could see the rocky bottom. Yumiya stared at the scenery in a daze until she realized that she was alone, Itachi nor anyone else in sight. Memories of what happened to her whirled in her mind. Ita? She called, her voice croaky and sore. Ita, where are they? Are they alive? She didn't know where she gathered the strength. She looked all around her before lifting herself up to drag herself out of the water. Her muscles screamed and her cuts burned, but she focused on her arms and made sure they moved one after the other. She let her left leg drag, for she knew any pressure on her sprained ankle would make it worse. Anomaly? Yumiya froze at the voice, wondering if she imagined it. Anomaly? A multitude of voices echoed, deep and otherworldly. She felt a sharp pain in her hand and saw that it was a large crow that pecked her, its feathers black with a blue tint when reflected in the light. Anomaly. It crowed before pecking her again, bruising her hand. Fear and confusion gripped her as she brought her hands over her face. With how big the bird was, it could poke her eyes out with one peck. It wasn't long before its friends came as well. One grabbed Yumiya's finger before tugging at it while the others surrounded her, some pecking at her body while others flew on top of her. She thought she was going to die from their excruciating pecks, but oddly they didn't. In fact, she felt shadowy chakra seep out of them and into her mind, making the pain and discomfort she felt like a mere illusion. Genjutsu? Yumiya stared at the crows in surprise as she sat up, shocked with how easy it was. Especially with all the crows standing all over her. She had to check to see that her wounds were still there, cuts, bruises, and the bandages Itachi applied gone. She knew that she shouldn't walk on her swollen ankle despite the lack of pain. Tenderly, she walked forward, careful not to put too much weight on it. Anomaly, the crows cried before one that was biting her finger flew up to her shoulder. The other crows hopped off her and down the river, looking as if they wanted her to follow. Coming, she whispered, quite bewildered. She stood up and began to walk amongst the murder. Was she dreaming? Whatever it was, a small part hoped that they were leading her to Itachi. He did always have crows with him in the manga, didn't he? He must be waiting for me. She brightened at the muddled thought and quickened her pace, wiggling her nose as the crow's wings tickled it with its flapping wings. But she had come to realize that things never really go as hoped. In the distance she spotted a person laying on their side, feet still in the water and black hair obscuring their face. The closer Yumiya got, the more she wanted to stop. Her mere thought seemed to throw the crows into a frenzy, some biting at her drenched clothes while others tugged and nipped at her ankles. All pushing at once. No option but forward. She trembled as she hobbled closer, dragging her feet, eyes fixed on the corpse. Far too soon, she towered above it. The crows went deathly silent, all following her slightest twitch. She never noticed, her sole focus on the body in front of her. Yumiya shakily covered her mouth, her stomach crawling as if something was trying to claw its way back up. There had been so much death. Flashes of crowds in a frantic race to safety filled her mind, bodies strewn across their path. Worse were the victims partially under the rubble, arms reaching out and eyes fixed in the horror of their final moments. All of it tattooed to her mind's eye. This one had long black hair and a familiar symbol sewn on the back of their kimono and... Yumiya gasped as her lungs refused to breathe. She fell to her knees. Mikoto? Craw! She gasped as one of the crows tugged at the hair, the woman's head flopping towards her. She cried out only to shriek in a mixture of relief and horror. It wasn't Mikoto. But half her face was heavily bruised, doing little to relieve the bile building in the back of her throat. She looked too much like Mikoto. Those last images of Mikoto overlapped with the corpse. The desperation in her eyes, blood oozing with each heartbeat from her side. She could smell that horrible mixture of burning smoke and blood. She shuddered before she felt a crow pecking her cheek, hard. Ah! She cried at the sting, the vision vanishing as quickly as it had come. The crow on her shoulder pecked her again and she swatted it off her shoulder. The moment it took flight, all the pain she felt came back in full force. She screamed as she fell to the muddy ground, withering on her side, facing the dead woman. The corpse's glossy eyes looked up and stared into hers. The woman should not be alive in her state, her clothes in tatters and black hair back to obscuring the bruised part of her face from the chilling wind. Her skin was pale and discolored, almost translucent. It looked like nature would have its way with her at any moment. The woman then wrapped her hand around Humiya's arm like a vice, making tears stream down her face from the pain. Sweet anomaly! The woman cried, her mouth ajar and unmoving. It is an auspicious day. First, I found that my dear Indra's incarnate survived and now the crows brought you here safely. Humiya stared trembling under the woman's grip. The crow she swatted off circled once before resettling on her shoulder, its chakra slowly making the pain she was experiencing drift away. How could she not have known the one who orchestrated all of this? Only one deity called her by that name. Naka? A rancid smile appeared in response. In the flesh, the body the goddess inhabited coughed and wheezed, making Humiya recoil. She wished she had a projection of the goddess rather than this. Apologies, child. I need a medium to be a part of this world and this woman's final moments were the only one you could reach. But be not concerned, her body will be used to properly compensate the crows. Humiya scrunched her brow, confused. How? Naka smiled. Why through deals, of course. An agreement is one of the most powerful things that you can do in this world. Just like you get to keep your memories for my eyes, she gets to return to me knowing that her little Azumi lived, and the crows have an opportunity to properly feed their young. A trade where all benefit is always for the best. Humiya gulped, not knowing which to fear more, the deal Naka made with the crows or what Naka needed to tell her. So, I must be quick. Humiya gasped as pain lanced through her wrist as Naka's grip impossibly tightened further. I feel his presence forming in this world. Beware, anomaly. Beware of Jashin. Humiya scrunched her brow, confused. She had never heard of that name before. Who? Jashin? Naka cried. A god far worse than the Shinigami himself. The abomination seeks to walk amongst the living and will do anything to get it. Even steal souls. Only death and destruction will come if he succeeds. Naka let go of Humiya and began to draw a small circle with an upside-down triangle in the middle into the mud. Humiya stared at the symbol drawn. Her eyes flicked to the symbol and back at Naka, noticing the body she was inhabiting deteriorating by the minute. She flinched as part of the body's cheek fell away to reveal the bone beneath. This symbol connects him to the world. If you see it drawn in blood, flee. Do not step into it, for if you enter, he will know what you are and you will be his. Do you understand? Humiya nodded. That crooked smile reappeared at the gesture, her shoulders sagging. Good. Now I must go. The crows are waiting. They will take you to a safe place. She then grabbed Humiya's cheek, making her shriek in surprise. Remember our deal. I would be displeased if you failed to fulfill our bargain. Humiya nodded again more feverishly before Naka let go. She watched the goddess let out her final breath, her eyes remained fixed to Humiya's. Suddenly, crows echoed from the trees. Hundreds, no thousands of crows descended from every tree, covering the body in moments. The whole mass moved in unison into the bushes and out of sight. Of the body, there was not a trace. The crow pecked her temple, causing her to lose consciousness yet again. But this time, the darkness was welcomed. Humiya dreamt of nothing as she slept only to have a rude awakening with something spicy in her mouth. Ack! She screamed, trying to spit it out, but inadvertently swallowed it instead. "Grandma Sancho, she's awake!" A little boy cried before running away. Yumiya looked around to find herself inside a small room, laying on a futon. It was a rundown room with cracks littering its wooden frame. It reminded her of a cottage. She looked down on the floor to see a bowl filled with the hot contents that still burned her mouth. "Curry? How did I? Goodness, Karasher, you're right. I knew the curry would do the trick." An old woman cried as she entered the room, her little boy gripping her side. Sancho was short with a kind aura, like a grandmother who would always offer sweets and good fortune to whoever came her way. She had long gray hair that was wrapped in a yellow baggy hat with her bands tied on the sides of her face. She also wore thick round glasses over her small beady eyes that made them look smaller than they were. The small boy named Karasher held the woman's navy blue apron as he stared at her, looking nothing like his grandmother. He had light brown hair that was tied in a ponytail and wore similar clothes to the old woman, but his outfit was light brown. What was most notable was his eyes, a beautifully deep purple. It made Yumiya's heart ache as the image of Kushina came to her mind the more she gazed into them, so she looked away. She must be dead now. Yumiya blinked as a calloused, yet tender hand was placed on her forehead. She looked into Sancho's soulful black eyes, and she was mesmerized by their depth. Just as quickly as her calming gaze appeared, she squinted away. "Looks like your fever broke," she mumbled to herself before addressing Yumiya directly. "I can tell you've been through a lot, young one. Please, lay back and rest. I'll fetch some water for you. Karasher, please watch her." "Yes, Grandma Sancho," Karasher replied before kneeling by Yumiya's side. With a satisfied nod, the old woman slowly moved away, her steps heavy despite her light frame. Once out of sight, Karasher seemed to deflate into his seat. He took out a block of wood with a pocket knife and absently scrapped many nicks on it. Looking closely, Yumiya realized that it almost looked like a crow. She also noticed he wasn't paying much attention to it, hands shaking and blade unsteady. He stopped a moment to look her way and gasped when he noticed her watching him. He set the block and knife aside and fidgeted in his seat. His lips parted several times as if to speak only to close, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. Sancho came back with a glass before Karasher could get a word out. "When Karasher told me that crows came and led him to you, I was quite shocked. I could hardly imagine what could have led to such an event," she sighed as she handed Yumiya the drink. Yumiya's parched mouth trembled at the wooden bowl covered in nicks and slashes, a light blue color all but worn away. She snatched it, rivulets of the cool liquid dribbling around her cheeks as she tried to drink it all the faster. "Thanks," she mumbled, the cup slipping from her fingers. She wiped the remaining water from her mouth with her hand. The other light tugged on the elderly woman's sleeve, remembering Itachi and Sasuke. "Brother. Baby. Seen boy like me?" Yumiya asked, her throat still sore. "Shoo, child. Don't speak and rest," Sancho replied, pushing her back onto the futon. "We did not see anyone with you where we found you. We can look for him once you are better, okay?" Yumiya hesitantly obeyed, feeling too drained to argue. She leaned back into the futon and looked out her open window at the foreign trees. She knew that she must be far from Konoha based on her savior's clothing, and hoped it wasn't too far. Right now, she had to get better and find out how to get back. Yumiya stopped counting how long she had been living in Sancho's curry restaurant by day 2, trapped again in a perpetual state of being bedridden. The only difference was that she ate curry every single day. She ate the spicy dish so much that she wanted to barf, but the opposite happened. In fact, Yumiya felt better with every passing day. "It's the curry," Sancho would say. "Good nutrition can heal all ailments, love. Everyone knows that." Yumiya doubted that. How can a simple bowl of curry heal birth defects? Reality found a way, not that she was complaining. She no longer had pain grip her heart, nor did her fingers randomly turn a scary shade of blue. Her ankle also healed in no time and the cuts on her body left no scars. Best to not think too deeply about it. Especially in this world. By the time she was free from the bedroom, she developed this burst of energy. She could run, and she was running. Through the halls, around the building. Everywhere. Yumiya must have made Sancho's head whirl because the elderly woman placed her outside, exasperated. She directed her to tell people who come close that it is closed until she called her inside for breakfast. A pretty useless job, in Yumiya's mind. So there she was, sitting in front of the restaurant, swinging a stick and yelling closed to every passerby who walked down the dirt road. Eventually, the road cleared, and with that emptiness came her thoughts. And sometimes, it was best not to think. I'm screwed, Yumiya whispered as she drew swirls in the dirt. She knew that she had to get back to Konoha as soon as possible, but she was at a loss on how to do it. She couldn't just waltz back in this 3-year-old body of hers, nor could she ask Sancho to take her back. The elderly woman did so much for her already. She just couldn't bring herself to bring it up. A tap on her shoulder drew her out of her thoughts. "Wah!" she shouted, jumping from her spot. Yumiya whipped her head back to see a sweaty Karasher, clutching the hand that he used to tap her and mumbling something. Yumiya shuffled her body toward the 8-year-old boy, leaning slightly forward to hear a semblance of what he was trying to say, not that it helped much. Karasher reminded Yumiya of a kettle, his face turning red as if heating up and on the verge of boiling over. I didn't mean to scare you," he exploded, trembling and balling his fists. "Okay," Yumiya said with a nod. Karasher opened one eye, looking like he was waiting for something to happen. Yumiya just blinked, already used to his antics. His shoulders relaxed after a few moments of silence and opened his other eye. Yumiya guessed whatever he was worried never happened. He inched closer. Grandma told me to check up on you after I was done with my chores." "Okay," Yumiya said again, in the same nonchalant manner. This was the most that Karasher had ever talked to her. He would usually be running for the hills by now, so this was progress. She looked at the ground and continued with her drawings. Swirls littered the ground, but the drawings became more intricate the more she drew. Now, she was drawing a willow tree with flowy branches and leaves. Yumiya glanced at Karasher, who was in the same place, rummaging through his pocket before taking out a wooden figure. "This is for you," he said, presenting it to her. I hope you like it." Yumiya looked down at the figure before gently taking it out of Karashi's hands. She marveled at the craftsmanship, its lack of detail not deterring from the skill she saw with her artistic eye. She smiled and ran her hand over the smooth wood. "Pretty crow," she said with a smile. Karasher beamed and inched close to her face, his purple eyes sparkling. Do you really think so?" He beamed. "Yeah," Yumiya said, backing away a little. Karasher seemed to have noticed this, so he backed away before kneeling down next to her. I like what you drew as well," he said, pointing to her drawing. Yumiya hummed in reply, drawing another leaf into the ground. "Caw!" Yumiya and Karasher both looked up toward the sound. A crow the size of her fluttered in front of them from a tree, a white mark shaped as a lotus in its breast, the same mark that was on her ankle. She backed away from the beast when she saw the mark. Karasher backed away as well, trembling at the sight of it. "Come!" the crow cawed. "Hurry!" Yumiya froze, wondering why of all people it needed help from her. She wasn't over her last encounter with those creatures. She could still see the murder surrounding that woman's body, the stench of rotting flesh. She covered her mouth, bile rising in her throat. Luckily, like a knight in shining armor, Sancho ran out of the restaurant with a broom. "Get, you pesky thing! Get!" the elderly woman shouted, swatting the bird with her broom. The crow hissed before flying away. "Are you all right?" she cried, assessing them. Karasher teared up and ran into Sancho's arms. Yumiya watched the bird fly away, shoulders still tense. She knew it would be back. Thank goodness it is gone. "Come along, children. Breakfast is ready. We have a long day ahead of us." Yumiya looked up at Sancho, who was patting the head of the still crying Karasher. "What's happening?" she asked. Sancho smiled. "We are going to the market, love. Now, clean yourself up before you eat. You two are covered in dirt." Yumiya did as she was told and went to the bathroom to prepare herself for the day. She wore Karashi's clothes that he outgrew. His tan shirt fit her more like a loose dress, and she had rolled up his baggy pant legs. Her small hands did not maneuver her long hair well, and it took her a while to braid. especially when it touched her lower held one of her dark brown fishtail pigtails, caressing the familiar pattern. Memories of how her mom in her past life taught her how to do these, the hours she was taught how to braid using dolls and finally doing her own hair. It made her sigh. She tied the ends of it with string. After she was done, Yumiya walked down the stairs to see a plate of buns on the table. She took one and took a bite out of it, tasting the savory filling inside. Of course it's curry. She took another bun, looking around the empty dining room and kitchen. It wasn't until she heard the bray of a mule that she thought to check outside. There she found Sancho and Karasher setting up a wagon. Yumiya decided to sit on the front steps and watch as she finished her breakfast. "Come on, human! You stubborn mule!" Karasher shouted, pulling on the lasso of the animal. The mule lifted its lips at Karasher and stuck his tongue out in defiance, towering over the boy. Yumiya couldn't help but smile a little. "Karasher, how many times have I told you to be patient with Cumin?" Sancho scowled, taking the lasso and leading Cumin to the front of the wagon. "You have to look forward and lead him confidently. Don't look back." But I did do that," Karasher mumbled as he climbed onto the wagon, his eyes still red from earlier. Sancho's eyes met with Yumiya's and smiled. "Come along and make yourself comfortable on the wagon, Yumiya. It is time to go," Sancho called, motioning her after she finished tying Cumin to the wagon. Yumiya complied and walked over only to find the wagon too tall for her to get in on her own. She went onto her tippy toes and grabbed onto the ledge to attempt to pull herself up. "Screw this small body. Here, let me help," Karasher said with his hand out. Yumiya grabbed it and he pulled her up. "Thanks," she said. Karasher nodded in reply as he closed the back of the wagon and tied it. "Are you ready?" Sancho asked as she climbed into the front. "Ready, Grandma," Karasher called. "And we're off," Sancho cried before flicking her reins. The mule let out a loud whinny, stomping his hoof on the ground. "Oh, calm yourself, Cumin. It is only a short trip," Sancho said, flicking the reins again. Cumin started to move forward down the dirt road at a granny-like pace, slow but consistent. The mule seemed to drag its feet as it clopped. The wagon shook a little each time they rolled over one of the rocks that littered the road. Yumiya grabbed onto the sides of the wagon, fearing that she might fall from a big bump. "Your hair," Karasher said, sitting comfortably across from her. It looks nice. I've never seen it done that way." "Oh, Mom showed me," Yumiya replied solemnly, tilting her head and twiddling the end of her braid. It felt like straw between her fingers. "Mom? Do you mean Ma?" he asked, leaning in closer. "Where you from?" Yumiya frowned. She did not understand why Karasher was so excited over her pronunciations. Sure, Karasher and Sancho's have an accent, but she couldn't be far from Konoha. "I was only river-bound for a night at most. If you want," he retracted timidly. "Konoha," she finally said. "Konoha?" Karasher repeated, confused. "Never heard of it." Yumiya's eyes widened at his reply, alarms blaring in her head. He turned to Sancho, who was mumbling rigmaroles to Cumin. "Grandma, you ever heard of Konoha?" he asked. "Konoha? Why, of course I know of it. Konoha is that hidden ninja village over in Fire Country," Sancho said. "Why, you mean the giant country right above us? One filled with ninja?" Karasher asked. "Yes, you have made quite the journey, I imagine," Sancho said to Yumiya. "No Fire Country?" Yumiya shouted. Karasher shook his head. "And no, this is River Country." Yumiya leaned back onto the wagon. "A whole other country? How long had I been drifting down that river?" She felt her chances of even getting back there begin to dwindle. "How far?" she asked pitifully. "Oh, not too far. About a week's journey by wagon," Sancho told her. Most merchants pass by the village on their journey to trade in Konoha, but the cost to pass the Fire Country border is quite expensive. Yumiya hung her head. "With the looks of things, I won't be returning through them. And of course, there is going to be a cost." "Just perfect." "How?" she whimpered. "You mean how much, love?" Sancho asked, scratching her chin. Yumiya nodded. "The exact price has left me, but I do remember almost fainting when I saw it," the old woman said. Yumiya hung her head, her eyes watery. "Ah, do not fret, Yumiya. I know that you miss your home, but you are safe with Karasher and I, Sancho said, reaching over and patting her head. I know how it feels to lose a loved one. That sinking feeling in your heart will lessen in time. Yumiya didn't reply, looking out at the forest. I can't be trapped here. I don't care if it takes me years, I am going to get back to Konoha. Mikoto and Fugaku must be worried sick about me or worse, think I'm dead. Sancho gave Yumiya a comforting smile before turning back to the road. Suddenly, a loud craw came from above. Yumiya looked up. It was back. The crow was in mid-flight, its wings covering the sun before it glided onto the wagon. It grabbed her with its sharp talons, pulling her up into the air. Hurry! Come! Hurry! The crow cried. Karasher let out a high-pitched scream before hiding in one of the barrels while Sancho whacked at it while grabbing Yumiya by her leg. Human made a loud bray before galloping forward, making the wagon shake. None of the chaos affected the bird one bit. It only let out a low craw, it almost sounded like a chuckle. Yumiya glared at the crow, hissing as its claws sank into her skin. Ack! Yumiya cried, away! Away! She cried, waving her hands at it. She wanted nothing to do with this crow nor any crows for that matter. Hang in there, Yumiya! Sancho screamed, one hand on the rein and the on her ankle. Yumiya couldn't take the tugging and bit the crow in the leg, making it let go with a squawk of pain. She felt her pigtails slap her face as she was pulled down and landed on Sancho's lap. Got you, she said as she whipped the reins forward. Yah, human! The mule brayed and began to gallop. Yumiya looked back and watched the crow turn into a black speck in the distance. They finally made it to the village. The Katabami gold mine village, Sancho called it. For a mining village, Yumiya imagined the place to be more desolate. The place might have been dusty with run-down buildings, but it was booming. Along the dirt roads of the town square, people of diverse backgrounds crowded the streets. The open stands stationed in front of many buildings were not as elaborate or colorful as the market in Konoha, but it still had bounds of people calling for those curious to buy whatever they were selling. But Yumiya didn't pay much attention to the sights, her mind filled with wonder on what that crow wanted from her. She looked up at the sky for the large demonic creature, but she only saw a blue sky with the occasional cloud. Is that crow gone? Karasher asked her, peeking from outside of the barrel. Yes, Karasher, Sancho said, slowing Cumin down as they rode down the crowded streets. That crow gave us quite a scare. Thanks goodness it's gone. She grabbed onto the rails as they went to a shaky halt. They stopped at a booth where an elderly man sold baskets of colorful spices. Sancho smiled down at the man that ran the shop. It has been too long, Rakio, she cheered, waving him over. Yumiya could tell that Rakio came from Suna. The old man reminded her of Gaara. He was a tall old man with eyes, a pale jade, with a long white beard. He wore a white turban and long reddish-brown robes with black pants, a white cloth wrapped around his waist and over his shoulder. Oh, how I missed my most valued customer. Rakio laughed, walking over to them with his cane before holding his hand up to help Sancho off. Stop it, you say that to every customer, Sancho giggled, grabbing his hand to get off. Caught me, Rakio chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. The usual assortment? Oh course. Sancho said. Karasher quickly climbed out the barrel and opened the latch to get off. Yumiya followed in his wake. Rakio watched them get off with a hearty laugh. My, what were you doing in that barrel, Karasher? Something gave you a scare, he asked, walking up to them. A huge crow came down and almost took Yumiya. Karasher cried, waving his arms to emphasize its size. Rakio ruffled Karashi's head. Now that's an adventure. He cheered before looking at Yumiya. Glad you came out unharmed. Their eyes met and his smile grew brighter. I never knew you picked up a granddaughter, he said. She always had a weak disposition, so this is her first time out, Sancho said offhandedly, holding the Cumin's reins to keep him still. Rakio nodded, stroking his beard. Ah, I see, he replied. How have you been? Sancho interjected. It has been a while since I have seen you, Rakio blinked. Oh. Honestly, business has taken a hit. Konoha has closed its gates, he said. Sancho gasped and replied, that's horrible. What happened? Rakio sat down on the bench behind his stand and sighed. Remember the earthquake a time ago? He asked. Oh, course. Shook the ground so hard that I almost fell, quite a few of my dishes broke too, Sancho replied. Well, a fellow merchant heard from another that it was caused by an ancient beast. They heard its mighty roars from miles away. The earthquakes were so big that they made the rivers change direction. Rakio cried. Look at the river yourself if you don't believe me. Yumiya trembled at the description. The Nine-Tails attack felt like it only happened yesterday. Also seen some Konoha nin scouring the area as well. Scary people, ninja, he continued. And the most wretched, Sancho added, shaking her head with her hand on her cheek. Yumiya perked up at that. Konoha nin? Where? Where? She cried, gripping the man's robes. Quiet, you are scaring the kids, Sancho said, prying Yumiya off Rakio and hugging her. She looks more enthralled than scared, darling, he replied. No scared. Wanna know? Yumiya insisted, her voice muffled by being squished by Sancho's embrace. The elder woman shushed her and said, you don't need to hide your fear, it's alright, Sancho. The ninja passed by here a few days ago. Gave me quite a scare when they asked me questions, but I thankfully had nothing that they wanted, the old man told her before standing up to greet a customer. Sancho sighed and dug into her apron pocket. She took out a small pouch tied with a long string and handed it to Karasher. Enough eavesdropping, kids. Get yourselves a bite to eat while us adults talk, she said, handing the bag to Karasher. Karasher smiled and opened the pouch to count what was inside. He then tied the string around his neck and tucked the pouch under his shirt. Now run along and come right back. We have to go cloth shopping as well, she told them, pushing Yumiya towards Karasher, wagging her finger. But, Yumiya mumbled. We will, Grandma, Karasher said, taking Yumiya by the hand and dragging her away. Yumiya pouted as Karasher dragged her through the crowds, upset about the missed opportunity to leave this place. Karasher, on the other hand, was beaming. What would you like to eat? Karasher asked, looking hungrily at the stalls selling different foods from buns to meats. Yumiya was still full from breakfast. No curry, she replied, knowing that she had enough curry for a lifetime. Karasher eyeing a stall, chuckling, I can't disagree with that. He led Yumiya toward the stall. Alright. Those kebabs look good, he said, pointing at the assortment of kebabs that the stall owner piled in front of them. He ordered 4 beef kebabs before handing Yumiya one of them. She looked at the meat and veggies on a stick and slowly took a bite. The savory meat mixed with the sweet vegetables was good. She ended up finishing it in a few bites. Karasher led her away, eating 2 kebabs in 1 bite. We each have Rio to spare, he said cheerfully. I need a new carving knife. Oh. Karasher. Karashi's body flinched at the sound of that. Oh no, he said, pulling Yumiya forward to run. But before he could gain momentum, Karasher was grabbed by the collar by a much older boy, looking about 12 or 13. Yumiya frowned at the boy. She knew a bully when she saw one. That's no way to treat a friend, you stuttering fool, the scruffy-looking boy laughed, wrapping his arm around Karashi's shoulders, snatching the remaining kebab in his hand before eating it in 1 bite. Karashi's shoulders tensed, watching his friend chew with his mouth open. Hey, Gerudo, he said, trembling. Gerudo tightened his grip around Karasher, making him choke. I am Golden Boy Gerudo. Not just Gerudo. How many times do I have to tell you? Gerudo asked, lifting a brow as he leaned over at him. Karasher opened his mouth to speak, but only a gargle came out. What? Cat still got your tongue? Gerudo asked with a sneer. I might forgive you if you give me all your Rio. Yumiya looked between the boys, and felt the tensions rise. She knew that if she did nothing, they were going to get hurt. She wondered if he was the danger the crow warned her about. Hey, Yumiya shouted, glaring at the boy. The boy only scoffed at her. You never told me you had a little sister, Gerudo said. Don't touch her, Karasher said, struggling under the guy's arm. Gerudo tightened his arms around Karashi's neck. I didn't say you can talk, you freak, he growled, reaching out to her with his other hand. In a rush, she did the only thing she could think of, kicking him in his groin. Gerudo doubled over in pain, loosening his grip on Karasher before falling to his knees. Yumiya took this chance to grab Karashi's hand and run. "Come on!" she shouted, weaving through the crowd. Yumiya rushed for as fast as her little legs could carry her, dragging Karasher behind her. That didn't last though, since the boy was much more athletic and ended up dragging her. She heard a familiar caw and looked up to see the crow from earlier circling above them. "Crow!" she cried. Karasher looked up and shrieked before turning a corner into an alleyway, its overhanging roofs obscuring the sky. He stopped behind a trash can. I think, we lost him," he panted, looking back. Yumiya huffed, putting her hands on her knees. She didn't remember the last time she ran so hard, adrenaline pumping through her. Yumiya looked behind and saw Naruto in the distance, his blonde hair rushing behind him and his yellow eyes enraged. "No! No!" she screamed. Karasher ran forward, but Yumiya tripped over a pebble and fell on her face. "Damn it!" she shouted in English. It was too late. Naruto caught up to them and kicked her in the stomach, hard. Yumiya gasped for air, the air too knocked out of her for her to scream. "That's for kicking me in the balls, brat," he spat before spitting in her face. Yumiya could only watch as Karasher backed against the way, staring at Naruto in horror as the bully drew near. Trembling, he balled his hands into fists. "Go away!" he screamed, lunging toward Naruto, only for the bully to grab him by the collar and slam him against the wall. "You think you could get away, pipsqueak?" he growled, tightening his grip. "I am Golden Boy Naruto. And you never cross me." Yumiya could hardly breathe as she tried to get up. She reached out to Karasher, his face turning red and drooling as he dangled. She could feel the life slowing fade. Desperate, she felt energy come into her eyes. Everything went into slow motion. "Stop!" she screamed. "What did you say to me?" Naruto snarled, turning to her. Their eyes met, and she felt herself connect with him. He froze as if under a trance. "Go," she ordered. Naruto shook as if trying to fight whatever force she had until she overpowered him. "You'll pay for this," he sputtered before running away. Yumiya breathed in relief, rubbing her now sore throat. She gathered her strength before going to Karasher. He was coughing on his hands and knees. She put her hand on his back. Thanks," he said, shaking as he got up, rubbing his neck as he looked at her. He gasped, "Your eyes." Yumiya put her hands over one. "Sharingan," she replied, willing the energy to leave her eyes. Karasher nodded, dazed. "Grandma is gonna freak if she sees it," he said. "Caw." They looked up and saw that it was the crow perched on a trash can. Yumiya never knew a bird could look so smug. Karasher huddled close to her as she glared at the crow. "Come?" it asked, tilting its head. Yumiya clutched her stomach and stood up, wanting so badly to say no. But, she knew that it wasn't leaving and she had no energy to flee at that point. "Fine," she gritted through her teeth. The crow squawked with glee as it fluttered off the trash can, beckoning them to follow. Yumiya and Karasher looked at each other before back at the crow. "Go," she told Karasher. Karasher groaned as he got up. They leaned on each other as they walked out of the alleyway. They walked into a less crowded street, the crow walking in front. The buildings around them were smaller with tin roofs, some more rusty than others. Many people sat around in rags, some eyed them. "I've never been in this part of town before," he fretted. "Grandma was clear about me not coming to this part of town." Yumiya hummed in reply, being too painful to talk. She limped forward. "Craw." The crow then stopped to look back at them. "What?" Yumiya asked. She watched the bird flap its wings and fly over and land on a wooden sign in front of large wooden gates. The gates led to a large building that had a rusted tin roof and wooden walls. A few of its windows were broken. In the courtyard looked to be a small wooden playground with a swing tied to a large tree. It looked to Yumiya to be an orphanage. "Hurry! Come!" it crowed. Yumiya glanced at Karasher, wondering if he had the same ominous feeling as she did. I guess it wants us to go inside," he said. Yumiya frowned, not completely trusting the bird. But it was either this or wander around the dangerous streets. She moved forward as Karasher held her shoulders, making her feel like a meat shield. They climbed the stairs to its chipped double doors and Yumiya fiddled with the lock. The door was unlocked. The interior looked as run down and the exterior, wallpaper peeling off the walls and holes in the floor. At least they could hear other children in the halls, some laughing while others chatted. At the end of the hall, they found a middle-aged woman with deep bags under her eyes. She looked down at them and deepened her frown, the lines protruding from her face. Of all times to have more orphans, she grumbled, turning to them. The aura that came from the woman made Yumiya shudder. Hello, Karashir mumbled. What are you doing here? Did your parents also abandon you with the promise that they were going to find work in Konoha? She asked. Yumiya furrowed her brow at the overly specific claim, face reddening with annoyance. And no. We are lost, he said. Do you know where the market is? Yumiya wanted to cheer Karashir on for his quick thinking, but realized that she didn't know where that blasted crow took them. They might as well be lost the more she thought about it. The matron let out a visible breath of relief. Why didn't you say so? The market is not actually far from here. What you have to do. Before the woman could finish, the sounds of a screeching baby were heard. The matron's mood immediately turned sour again. Damn baby. Why can't it stay quiet like the others? She hissed as she stomped toward the sound. Yumiya and Karashir followed. Inside the room they entered, there were rows of babies in cribs, some of them whining while hugging themselves as if trying to comfort themselves. This made Yumiya's heart ache. I am here, so quiet you, the matron said as she lifted the crying baby roughly, coughing in her arms. Yumiya looked closer and was shocked to see who it was. Sasuke! She cried. The first thing Kushina Uzumaki saw when she opened her eyes was a painfully blurry white. She blinked rapidly at the reflective shade before noticing she was surrounded by a curtain. The familiar stench of rubbing alcohol and death filled her nose. With the smell alone, she knew that she was in the hospital. Kushina tried to lift herself up, but the aches in her body made her limbs heavy, almost limp. After a few attempts, she sluggishly sat up to find herself wearing a white robe and under a thin blanket. She put her hand against her temple in an attempt to clear the fogginess in her head, but it did little to remedy it. Then, she heard a baby cry, her baby cry. All at once, flashes of what happened busted in her mind. Yumiya's prophecy, Naruto's birth, the masked man's taunts as he released the 9 tails from her stomach. Minato's sorrowful expression as he formed the seal that took his life and soul. Naruto? She rasped, tasting iron. Naruto! Kushina grabbed the curtains that surrounded her as leverage to get out of bed only for it to collapse and take her with it. She tumbled and collapsed onto the floor, making Naruto weep louder. The door to the hospital room swung open to reveal a nurse. Goodness, are you alright, Mrs. Uzumaki? She gasped, rushing up to Kushina. Naruto. Kushina groaned. Your baby is alright, ma'am. Checked him earlier. Either just hungry or needs a diaper change, the brown-eyed nurse said as she gently picked her up bridal style before tucking her into bed with ease. I'll give him to you once you're situated. Kushina watched the nurse check her before going to Naruto. The baby flailed in the woman's arms. Her heart clenched. Diapers not soiled. Most likely hungry. Here you go, ma'am. The nurse said. She handed the baby to Kushina, helping her position Naruto in her arms for nursing. Kushina sighed in relief when Naruto stopped crying and began to drink. There we go, ma'am, the nurse sighed as she straightened her dark blue hair under her cream cap. I'll let Madame Sarutobi know that you are awake. Madame Sarutobi, Kushina repeated before her eyes widened. You mean Biwako is alive, you know? The nurse nodded and bowed before leaving. Kushina looked down at Naruto, a glimmer of hope ringing inside her. If Biwako is alive. Maybe Minato. She loosened the light blue blanket that was wrapped around Naruto and placed her hand on his stomach. She pushed a little chakra into him to reveal the inky swirls etched onto his skin. Kushina's body went cold as she stared at the seal, her heartbeat quickening. She closed her eyes and sensed the 9 tails coursing through her from her seal as well, weaker but still there. The Reaper Death Seal. Not only did Minato sacrifice his life for the village, but also his soul. The knock on the door broke Kushina from her concentration and watched Biwako walk in with tears in her eyes. Her mentor looked better than she had in years, her light brown hair in a ponytail and her petite frame that was hunched over with age now stood tall. She wore her white robes when she worked as a medical nin before she retired. He's gone. Kushina sobbed, looking back at Naruto, his blue eyes staring up at hers. Minato's eyes. She kissed Naruto on the cheek. He's really gone. Biwako placed a hand on her shoulder. Why him? Kushina cried, rocking back and forth. Why? You know why, Biwako whispered as she rubbed her shoulder. Now, take a breath and calm yourself. You are still recovering. Kushina took a deep breath and wiped the tears from her face. She did know why. It was for the village. Almost everything they did was for the good of the hidden leaf. Knowing that did not ease the gaping void in her chest. You have been unconscious for 3 weeks now, on the verge of death. Your body sustained a significant amount of damage, but you are expected to make a full recovery, Biwako explained. And Naruto is a healthy baby boy. It is a miracle. A miracle? Kushina spat. Nothing about this is a miracle. She caressed Naruto's cheek as he gave a little coo. Minato's dead and the village. Oh, the village. Did we at least catch the man who did this? Biwako's grave expression told her everything. And Mikoto? How many people died? Everything is being handled. Your friend is alive. Do not stress yourself over small things, Biwako replied simply. Small? Kushina shouted. How can you say that? Masked attacker or not, she played a hand in this catastrophe. Rage mixed with guilt as she felt the gravity of her people's death, families ruined. Mikoto, her best and most caring friend, home was destroyed with countless family members killed. There was blood on her hands, so much blood. If she wasn't so careless, could this have been prevented? Could Minato still be alive? You will be staying with me and my husband in the Satobi main house. Luckily, my residence came out with only a few broken windows, but your house was completely destroyed in the attack, Biwako said, taking her hand off of Kushina's shoulder. Kushina could not help but let out an empty chuckle. The years that she and Minato spent saving enough money to buy a house to call their home, of her hopes of having the big happy family she and Minato always wanted, all for naught. If only she realized how selfish that dream was back then. She never would have thought that one selfish dream could cost the lives of so many. You have a long way to go before stepping out of this hospital. You will be put under observation these upcoming weeks and you are to stay in this room, Biwako told her. Alright, Kushina said, resigned to her fate. Thank you, if you need anything, just call for the nurse, Biwako told her before leaving. Alone again, Kushina was left to her thoughts. Naruto touched her wet cheek, and she looked down at him. I am so sorry, Kushina whispered, caressing his small puff of blonde hair. You are going to have a hard life. You are going to have to grow up without a father. She kissed him on the forehead and held him close. Her son stared at her, his innocent gaze filling her with determination. She wiped her tears. But don't you worry. I will protect you and you will grow up to be a powerful ninja, you know. You will have good days with your dad and always have someone by your side. You will never be alone, Naruto. Kushina smiled as Naruto grabbed her finger, his grip strong. Kushina stopped counting how long she had been in her hospital room after a month, the days going by too fast for comfort. She knew she was being avoided, isolated from the rest of the patients. Even when she walked the halls, all of the doors were closed and the fellow patients she did meet made sure to keep their distance. Kushina resigned to write letters to Mikoto and Kakashi, asking how they were doing but received no replies. This worried her greatly, but she could do little to remedy it until today. There was a knock on the door before it opened to reveal her nurse, who she found was named Sarah, looking more chipper than usual. Mrs. Uzumaki, Madam Sarutobi told me that it was time for you to go to the Sarutobi main house. Here are your clothes, Sarah said as she handed her a pile of clothes with some wooden sandals and a bag. Please let me know when you are done, so I can bring an escort. Kushina smiled and nodded her thanks before the nurse left. She felt giddy as she unfolded her clothes to change into them. It was a simple green dress with pink flowers printed on its hem and loose sleeves. Once she finished getting ready, she pinned her long red hair into a loose bun. She then looked in the bag and saw that there was baby supplies and snacks in it which she was grateful for. There was a cream sling in the pile and gently slung still sleeping Naruto to her chest with it. It seemed that the only thing Naruto inherited from her was that he was also a heavy sleeper when he felt safe and comfortable. With a small bit of smoke, her hair was no longer a deep red but Minato's blonde and her eyes his blue. After they were ready to go, Kushina opened the door and peeked outside the hallway to see it was empty as usual. "I can do this," she whispered to herself before walking down the hallway to the stairwell. She reached the staircase and went down, stopping midway to let nurses carrying someone in a stretcher walk past. She knew they were dead with the lack of chakra coming from them and the white sheet covering their body. Kushina bowed her respected before continuing on her way, wondering how many other people she knew had to be carried the same way after the attack. She imagined Minato being taken to his resting place. She wasn't even able to attend his funeral. Kushina wished that he could be cremated and kept with her but remembered the tradition. Hokages were all put into graves somewhere in the Hokage monument. Either way, her husband's soul would never find peace with the deal he made with the Shinigami, and to her knowledge, there is no way for a contract with a deity to be reversed. His body might be peacefully cold but his soul, condemned to damnation. Kushina shook her head, blinking away any oncoming tears. "I can't think of this right now. There's nothing I can do about it," she whispered. Kushina continued down the stairs and to the front entrance, trying to make herself look confident. "Mrs. Uzumaki," the front desk lady called to her. Kushina almost tripped, cringing at her name being called. She should have expected that the front desk woman was a censor. With a face masked with a smile, she walked up to the woman with large circular glasses. "Good afternoon." She glanced down at the woman's name tag. "Chi-Chi." "What is it?" she asked with a large grin. "I was told that you would be leaving with an escort," Chi-Chi said, writing something down on a sheet of paper. Kushina gave a light-hearted laugh. "Oh, I convinced Biwako that I did not need one. I met up with her on the way here and she said okay after some persuasion, you know." "I see," Chi-Chi replied, not looking like she bought it. "Is that why you are using a henge? Let me go check." "Oh, this? I am easily recognizable, you know." "I don't want to be bothered as I go home," Kushina said with a wink. "You don't need to bother Biwako with something she has already cleared. She is a very busy woman, and you would only bother her. You know how she gets when she has to say things twice." The front desk woman sighed solemnly. They both knew of Biwako's harsh tongue. "If you put it that way." Kushina heard the lobby door open and saw a group of frantic people rush in, quite a few of them carrying their bloodied and bruised comrades. "And you have patients to attend to." "Goodbye." Kushina cheered. "Hey, wait!" Kushina weaved past the crowd and was already out the door and down the congested dirt road before Chi-Chi could finish. She would make sure to give her nurse and the front desk lady a few apology gifts and personally thank them for their care later. She took a deep breath of fresh autumn air and patted Naruto, her baby still sleeping peacefully in her arms despite their noisy surroundings. "Heavy sleeper indeed," she said to herself. Next stop, Uchiha compound. Kushina continued down the road and looked at all the buildings in different stages of being rebuilt, construction workers hammering into their roofs. The streets were luckily cleared of any debris, and she knew where she was going. In case someone was following her, Kushina took the longer route to the compound, walking down crowded streets and going down a few alleyways. She even stopped by a few stalls and got some gifts she knew Mikoto's children would like. Along the way, she stopped at a pile of rubble where a street used to be and a part of her just wanted to jump from building to building, but she doubted Naruto could handle it. She decided to go around. A few minutes later, she finally made it to her destination, huffing from the excursion. She cursed her still healing body, remembering when walking a few miles was a breeze. Kushina could tell that the Uchiha clan had been hit the worst, with almost all of the buildings that used to stand proud and tall now only piles of rubble. At least a few of the residential homes still stood and some of them looked rebuilt. The entrance was blocked off with yellow tape. Her mouth was agape, staring at the sign that was no longer the Uchiha fan. "Hyuga?" Kushina shouted as she looked at the symbol that shamelessly replaced the Uchiha symbol, her arms trembling with rage. Naruto woke up and began to cry, making Kushina regret shouting. "Shoo! I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to wake you, you know. Mommy just surprised herself," she hushed, rocking him. He only cried harder. Realizing that her disguise might be the problem, she dispersed the henge. "Look, it's mommy. Don't cry. It's okay." Kushina hushed until Naruto's crying reduced to mere whimpers. She then checked him and found that he needed a diaper change. She found a bench where she changed him and looked around. The place was desolate, but she was far from giving up. She began her search for people. After walking down the road and turning a corner, she saw a pair, who she assumed to be father and daughter, digging through the rubble. When she went to take a closer look, she saw that the man did not look like an Uchiha with his golden brown skin. His daughter looked like she took mostly after her mom with her long hair a dark brown and a beauty mark under her eye. "Dad, I found Mom's picture frame." The little girl cheered, waving the broken frame in her hands before putting it into her bag, the Uchiha symbol on her purple shirt sleeve. "Great, Izumi." Her dad cheered, "It's getting late. Go to the wagon, so we can go back." "Excuse me," Kushina called, jogging to them. The father walked to meet her with his daughter hiding shyly behind his legs. "Do you know where the Uchiha compound is now?" she asked them. Izumi looked up at her father and he patted her head. "The Uchiha compound and the police force headquarters have been relocated near the northern gate," the man told her. "Really? That's all the way out in the outskirts, you know. How will the police do their job when they are in the middle of nowhere?" Kushina asked, furrowing her brow. The man shrugged. "It was the Hokage's orders. We have to follow them." Kushina grumbled at that but nodded. She wanted to say more, but Izumi's stomach began to growl. She smiled down at the girl and took out a ration bar from her bag. The girl stared at the bar hungrily but checked with her dad for permission. After her dad nodded, she gingerly took it before eating it. "Would you like one as well?" "I have plenty," Kushina insisted, handing him one. The man shook his head. "No, thank you." "Are you looking for someone?" "Yes," Kushina said. "I want to know if a friend of mine survived." The man nodded in understanding. "There is room on our wagon if you need a ride," he said, his daughter nodding in agreement. "That would be wonderful, you know." Kushina cheered before hopping onto their wagon with them. The man flicked the reins, causing the donkey to bray and move forward. Izumi sat between her dad and Kushina, nibbling on her bar. She glanced at Naruto as Kushina fed him. "He is so cute," the little girl said. "What's his name?" "Naruto," Kushina said with a small smile. The girl giggled. "Like the fish cake?" "Yes." Kushina laughed. "Exactly, you know. I was eating ramen with my husband at our favorite ramen shop when the name came to him." She smiled at the memory. It was one of the few days that Minato and she were able to have a proper date since he became Hokage. She insisted that they go to Ichiraku ramen since it was one of her pregnancy cravings. She remembered how she couldn't stop laughing when Minato shouted the name like he uncovered a huge discovery. She joked that their baby will always be their little fish cake no matter how big and strong he got. Kushina began to tear up. She has been doing it a lot these days. If only he was here. There was a moment of silence for the dead. Mom was obsessed with ramen too. She would make it for dinner all the time, remember Dad? Izumi mumbled, her eyes watery as well. I would always complain about it. I shouldn't have. She worked so hard, and I should have thanked her more. Tell her that I loved her, but, now I can't. I miss her so much. Izumi, her dad cried, giving her a side hug as she wept into his arms. She knew that you loved her. Even if we never said it, she knew. Kushina comfortingly rubbed her back and looked down the dreary path to the Uchiha compound. The rest of Kushina's journey was in silence. The wagon shifted from quiet streets to busy intersections. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the forestry outskirts of the Hidden Leaf village. Kushina leaned back and basked in the coolness the shade of the overhanging trees gave them. She knew that she would have gotten there faster if she ran, but traveling the civilian way felt a lot calmer than the usual ninja rush from mission to mission. It was also better for Naruto, who was sound asleep in her arms. Hearing familiar rustling in the trees, she looked up and saw a few ninjas tree hop by. This made Kushina look ahead and notice a few buildings in the distance, the hostels. They made it. The pair of rundown wooden buildings stood lopsided with tin roofs, the Uchiha symbol hanging proudly on the sign in front. Even though many people passed through the village, the southern point was a more popular entry with its clutter of shops and hotels. It left the commodities on the northern side neglected. It was a wonder the buildings survived the attack. It seemed like this was the only part of the village that was left practically unscathed. Kushina couldn't help but grimace. The Uchiha clan used to be a small village all on its own but was now reduced to this few. The wagon stopped at the front entrance. The man helped Kushina and his daughter off it. Among the few passers-by, Kushina saw no one familiar. Everyone seemed to be keeping their distance, pretending to mind their own business while giving her small glances. This reminded her of when Mikoto told her how many members of the Uchiha were actually very talkative, contrary to popular belief. Uchiha parents tended to drill into their children's heads to keep conversations behind closed doors and only with those they most trusted. A familiar ache returned to her chest. Gone were the days when she would talk with Mikoto for hours on end from everything to nothing in particular. Now that she thought about it, she wasn't even sure that Mikoto would even want to talk to her. She hadn't replied to any of her letters. No one did. "I will meet you back at our room," he told his daughter before bowing goodbye to Kushina. "I never got your name, you know." Kushina called as everyone got off the wagon. The man smiled slightly. "Daiki. I hope you find your friend," he said before going around back. "I hope you find your friend as well. And thanks again for the bar. It was really good," Izumi said as well before giving her a hug. "Me too," Kushina whispered, returning it. "Bye Kushina." "Bye Naruto," Izumi said, about to walk away, but paused. "Itachi," she gasped, sprinting down the dirt road. Kushina's eyes widened in the direction Izumi ran and there he was, Mikoto's oldest, walking toward them with an older boy in tow. The 5-year-old boy limped slowly, leaning against a crutch due to his bandaged leg. He had a haunted look on his face, an expression that should be reserved for traumatized ninja. "Itachi," she called as well, following the little girl to the pair. "Izumi and Mrs. Uzumaki?" he greeted, not bothering to hide his surprise. "I was looking all over for you," Izumi cried, hugging him. Itachi patted her back and looked up at Kushina, his eyes widening when his eyes drifted to baby Naruto. "This is Naruto," Kushina said to Itachi and Shisui. "I am happy that you are all alright." Kushina smiled at the reunion before looking at the older Uchiha boy. He was slightly taller than Itachi, his short black hair spiky. She eyed the headband that gleamed on his forehead. Based on his headband alone, she would assume that he was at least 12 or 13, but he was much too small. She realized that the little boy before her was the child prodigy people have been raving about, Shisui. The child genius who, like Kakashi, graduated early due to the Third Ninja War. Much too early in Kushina's opinion. He smirked at her, but his eyes could not hide his exhaustion. "When I saw the bridge collapse, I thought you didn't make it," Izumi cried, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "You don't have to worry about Itachi here," Shisui chuckled as he ruffled Itachi's hair. "He's a lot stronger than he looks." "I look weak?" Itachi asked, clutching his crutch. "Of course not," Izumi huffed, glaring at Shisui. "Itachi is one of the strongest ninjas I know." "Who are you to call him that?" "I am Shisui," he said. "How do you know Itachi?" "He saved my life. He brought me to safety during the attack with Yumiya and Sasuke on his back. It was so cool," Izumi said, her eyes sparkling. She looked around and behind the boys. "Where is Yumiya and Sasuke, anyway?" "Yes, I also want to know where they are." "I brought you all gifts," Kushina added. She dug into her bag and took out a pink dinosaur plush, a bronze flower hairpin, and a box of dango before handing the items to Itachi. "Here, I am sure Sasuke would love this plush as much as his green one and Yumiya would adore another pin." "I know how much you love dango." Itachi stared at the gifts, his eyes beginning to water. "Thank you for the gifts. They would have loved them." I will put them on their graves," he whispered. Kushina covered her mouth in shock, the information piercing her worse than getting her pressure points stabbed by poison Senbon needles. "Yumiya and Sasuke, gone?" Izumi whimpered, still trying to grasp what she just heard. We were so close to the shelters, but I failed them. They were swept away in the river, their bodies not found, and the rock crushed my leg. I lost a few toes. The healer told me that it will permanently hinder my balance. Itachi held the gifts against his chest. Despite this handicap, I promise to become the strongest ninja. I will find the man who did this and destroy him. Kushina saw Itachi's expression in many of her comrades during the war. All making a personal vow to take revenge even if it killed them. It never ended well, their fate was to go off alone and become a shell of who they once were with that singular purpose. She knew the pain that was etched into his soul. She could not bear to see Mikoto's son go down that path. Her friend lost so much already. Kushina kneeled to his eye level and put a hand on his shoulder. Itachi, if everyone who lost their loved ones to that man thought the same way you do, who would be left to protect those who survived? Who would protect the village? Itachi was silent, clenching his fists. Kushina put her hand over his injured leg and concentrated her chakra on it. The burst of energy transferred into Itachi's leg, healing it. Itachi unwrapped the bandages and she saw his foot healed, but his first 3 toes were still missing. Itachi struggled a little before standing upright before stumbling a little. Why can't I find balance? You are strong, Itachi. Even if your balance is permanently damaged, you have the makings of becoming a powerful ninja. Soon, this will only be a small hindrance, Kushina said. Remember that one of the core values of being a ninja is teamwork. Yeah. Izumi said, I am going to be a ninja too and bring the one who killed my mom to justice. You got to grow a little first, Shisui said, ruffling Izumi's hair. Hey, you became a ninja young. Why can't I? It's a long, boring story, Izumi. Shisui said. I want to hear it as well, Itachi mumbled. We both want to be as strong as you. Kushina smiled at the trio. She knew that they were going to be an amazing team. She said her goodbyes to them and left. Kushina grimaced the whole way to the Sarutobi main house. After the pep talk, she gave it to Itachi in his group. She couldn't bring herself to meet with Mikoto. The feeling that she sent Yumiya and Sasuke to their deaths was overwhelming. The round building seemingly untouched by the catastrophe that happened. It looked like many of the other homes in the neighborhood, pipes running through the wooden roof of the circular building. She walked up to the house's front door and knocked at the door. A few moments later, the door opened to reveal Biwako's son at the door holding a small hammer. Kushina put on a fake smile, trying to hide her mourning. Asuma, you've grown. She cheered. It is good to see you too, Aunt Kushina, he replied, allowing her inside. Kushina looked at the house, it being the same as was when she left with its cream walls and hardwood flooring. She took off her shoes and put them into the shoe cabinet. So, this is Naruto, Asuma said as he put the hammer down on the shoe cabinet, staring at the sleeping baby. He looks just like Lord Fourth. Yes, Kushina replied, feeling the awkward tension in the room. A part of her wondered if it could cut butter. Would you like to hold him? Asuma put his hands up, his whole body tensing as if he wanted to say no. Okay, Kushina couldn't help but chuckle at that before loosening her sling and tying it onto him. Just hold him like this. There you go. She watched Asuma as he held Naruto securely, watching her baby still sleep soundly. She wondered if her walk to the compound was too much for her little boy. I will come back to check on you two in a bit, she told him, handing him her scroll filled with baby supplies. Come to me if there is a problem. Kushina then walked past him and went to her room. She opened the door and saw that it was a lot smaller than she remembered. It had the same neatly made twin-size bed and small cabinet across from it. The old end table that was situated next to her bed was replaced with a small crib that was not quite finished being assembled, the scroll with the instruction and pieces still sprawled on the floor. I should thank him later, she said to herself as she opened the cabinet to see clothes neatly hung and folded in it. Lastly, she looked at the large chest on the end of her bed that had a note stuck to it. She noticed that it was in Biwako's neat handwriting. Kushina, within this chest contains what we could salvage from your house and Minato's belongings from his office. Biwako. Kushina gasped as she read it before quickly opening the chest to see a pile of scrolls. The neat stack of scrolls was all labeled with different things from kitchen items to ninja tools. Nothing seemed to really catch her eye until she noticed a scroll that made her hands tremble. "Minato," she whispered as she quickly took out the sealed thin scroll. She concentrated her chakra to her finger and ran it down his swirly text to undo the seal to read it. "My beloved Kushina, if you are reading this, I am no longer in this world. First, I would like to apologize for not being strong enough to continue to be there for you. To share our joys and sorrows, to help raise Naruto. There are many possibilities to how I died, so I have written multiple wills for as many as I could think of and a letter for you to not be seen by the courts. This pertains to if I died from an enemy attack which caused significant damage to the village and our property. How to distribute our assets will be read aloud in the courts, but I sealed another copy at the end of the letter in case the one I have given is tampered with. My beloved, I know you are in pain and that you want to avenge my death. But I implore you to not sacrifice yourself and do so alone. I will only be able to rest in peace if you raise Naruto to be strong and help the village. Sincerely, Minato." By the end of reading the short letter, drops of Kushina's tears littered it, messing up the ink. She placed it away from her to cause no more damage. "But you will never rest in peace in the stomach of the Shinigami. You not only sacrificed your body but also your soul," she wept. Kushina felt so weak and numb, she clenched her fists so hard that her nails dug into her skin. She had lost so much, the village had lost so much. It was because of one nameless man. She vowed with all her being to raise her son to be the best he could be and contribute in any way she could to strengthen the village to combat the evil that was that masked man. She collapsed onto her bed, and she cried herself to sleep. In a dream, Kushina was no longer the stubborn and strong young woman but a feeble little girl, covered in cuts and bruises in a dense forest. She washed her wounds in a running creek. Her red hair only went down to her waist, oily as if she hadn't bathed in days. Fear dulled the usual vibrance in her violet eyes. Kushina heard a twig snap which ushered her to run further down the woods. It was dark, but she knew whoever was chasing her was nearby. She stumbled upon a run-down temple that seemed to have been abandoned ages ago. She scurried into it to hide. It was drafty, the worn wood rotten in some places and walls peeling. The only place in the small building that looked oddly well-kept was a wall adorned with demon masks, some with horns and others with sharp teeth. Kushina wanted to do nothing more but cower. The door to the place then opened to reveal an old woman wearing a priestess attire. Her clothing, though ripped in some places, she carried more elegance and precision than any royalty. Her hair was white with streaks of red still in it, with her eyes a pale lilac due to a white sheen of blindness. "Grandma?" Kushina cried. It was at that moment that she realized that this wasn't some nightmare, but a memory. A memory buried so deep into her mind that she thought she had forgotten it. She wasn't in some old forgotten temple, but the reminiscence of the once great Uzumaki temple. "Grandma." Kushina stood up and ran over to the blind woman and held her as if her life depended on it. "I followed what you said, you know. I followed the Naka River out of sight like you told me to escape danger. There were so many bad men." Kushina's voice was muffled as she snuggled into her grandma's embrace. I thought you wouldn't make it. Of course, I made it out alive. I foretold it, did I not?" Her grandma rubbed her back. "What do they want from us?" "They want you, Kushina. I prayed to the spirits to change your fate, but all fell on deaf ears. You were chosen, my child, to become the next Jinchuriki." Grandma heaved as she coughed heavily. "Grandma, I am fine for now. Let me sit down." Kushina led her to a ripped cushion next to the altar of masks. "I don't want to be a Jinchuriki," Kushina whispered as she laid her head on her lap. "You have to get better. You're all I have left. I will not be for long. I have little time left. Soon, you will have many people in your life who will love and care for you as I have." "I saw it all in my dreams," her grandma insisted as she petted her hair. "But, hush now. I need to tell you something important. Do you see those masks hanging there on display? Those are why we are called mortals above gods, Kushina. I need you to always remember them. Especially the one in the middle, the strongest, the Shinigami." Kushina stared at the Shinigami mask. The same Shinigami that now tortured Minato's soul. Its twisted smile looked as if it was mocking, its sharp yellow teeth contrasted with its white face. Long ago, before either of us were born, gods were among us, wreaking havoc and blessing miracles. Their powers were so great that people all around would worship them. Some even loved us mortals and made great clans. Our ancestors wanted that power, and they got it. We caught all of them?" Kushina asked. "Once the Uzumaki captured the Shinigami, it did not take long for us to also take its brethren," her grandma chuckled. "But for a price. A price has to be paid when putting on the mask. That is why even in this state, no one has dared to touch them. For most, it is their life and soul. For us Uzumaki, it is only an inch of your life." Grandma opened her palm and traced a line on it. "Uzumaki are known for their long lifelines, so a few years gone is nothing for us." Her grandma then took her necklace off and gave it to her. "Here, your amulet?" Kushina asked. "But you never take that off." A black jewel the size of an eyeball was situated in the middle of a bronze plate necklace with ancient seal markings around it. At the center, a red lotus was etched on it. "Remember to keep it safe. The one who this belongs to searches for it still, and you must never let them have it back," she warned. Before she could ask why, the door opened, and Hidden Leaf Ninja began to pour in. Before they could get her, she awoke with a gasp. Kushina looked around and saw Naruto sleeping peacefully in his now finished crib. She got up slowly and made sure not to disturb him and went back to the chest. She found the scroll-labeled jewelry to make sure the amulet was there. It was. She stared down at it. Kushina could not believe that her memories of her grandma were so faint until now. Kushina never saw her again after that night. She died shortly after Kushina became the Jinchuriki. She might not have been able to save her grandma, but she must save her husband's soul. "Minato, I will free you," she whispered to herself. A week passed before Kushina regained most of her strength. She spent most of her time taking care of Naruto. Before long, Kushina found an opportunity to slip out of the Sarutobi house and go to the Uzumaki temple. She made sure to wear the amulet. Luckily was able to make Asuma play babysitter again and be off on her merry way. Kushina might have regained her stamina, but just to be safe, she hitched a ride on a wagon to get mostly there by a couple of friendly farmers. When she got off, she saw the beginning of the familiar dirt path of her youth. Kushina stared at the overgrowth before beginning down the path. The farther she walked, the more she sensed that someone was following her. Her ninja senses were ringing like alarm bells. Kushina continued down the path, pretending not to notice. The chakra signature felt familiar. Of someone who watched over her a lot while she was pregnant. After a few minutes of walking, she found the shrine. It was more run down than she remembered, with the entrance barely visible with the roof weight caving in. Kushina gathered her bearings before she entered the temple. Inside, the only thing that looked untouched was the masks that adorned the wall. Not even dust touched them. She took a deep breath before going to grab the Shinigami mask and put it over her face. Immediately after, she felt the demon's presence. "An Uzumaki? Interesting. The last imbecile who put on my mask was swiftly killed," an eerie voice whispered in her head. "Release my husband, now!" She screamed, knife in hand. Laughter erupted in her head. "You dare order me with that weak body of yours? Be grateful your soul is still intact," the god said. "But my husband?" Kushina faltered, lowering the knife. "I was told you would release the spirits in your stomach if you possessed a body and cut their stomach. This can't be for nothing." "Interesting. You actually believe that?" "I can do that for someone who is strong. If I even tried to possess you, you would die on the spot," he said. "But there is a way, I suppose. Let's make a deal." Kushina is silent for a moment. "A deal? How do I know you would keep your end of it?" she asked. "And how would I know if you keep your end of it?" "It is the risk of the deal and why they are so powerful," he said. "If you free me from this mask, I will set everyone in my stomach free. Do you have a deal?" Kushina was hesitant, thinking of the consequences of setting a death god out into the world. "I may be a merciful god, but I am not a patient one. Choose." As Kushina stood there quietly, the screams of the souls in his stomach rang in her head, Minato's being the most pronounced. "I'll do it!" she screamed before prying off the mask. Inside it, there was a seal. Kushina bit into her thumb and drew blood before writing the universal sign to undo a seal. The mask then crumbled in her hands and the Shinigami spread his arms out before her and opened his mouth. Hundreds, maybe thousands of souls flowed out of his mouth and away from her. She quickly looked around for Minato but could not find them. Then she heard an eruption of laughter. The other masks on the wall began to crumble and the other demons started floating away. Pleasure doing business with you, the Shinigami laughed and was about to go through her, but a flash of light stopped him. It came from the jewel in her necklace. So, you, her eye. Interesting, the Shinigami said as he whirled around her. We will meet again. He then left with all the other demons. Kushina's legs went heavy and fell on her knees, feeling the weight of what she had released out into the world. She looked up at the remaining fiery soul and held her hands out to it. It was Minato. She could feel him. Minato, you're free, you know, she whispered before she collapsed onto the floor, feeling the strain from how much chakra it took out of her. Instead of landing on the floor, she felt a ball of warmth surrounding her. Kushina reached out for it. Can you stay with me, just for a little while? She heard Minato's voice. My love, all of me cannot stay by your side, but a piece of me still lives in you, Minato echoed. Thank you. A part of her thought it was just her imagination that she could hear his voice, feel his warm embrace. And with him, everything went dark. If Yumiya didn't have a life mission from the goddess, Naka, to find her eyes, she would have happily lived in Sancho's curry shop for the rest of her days. Life there was as blissfully uneventful as life in the ninja world could get. The perfect place to grow up happy and healthy. Yumiya sat on the back porch peeling potatoes, a daily chore that she dreaded. She had to be nimble with her tiny hands when peeling potatoes with a large sharp knife. It was a lot of work to peel a whole crate of them before breakfast, but it was the least that she could do for Sancho caring for Sasuke and her so dearly. Yumiya stared at the half-peeled potato, deep in thought. Months turned to years and Yumiya went from a sickly toddler to a healthy 9-year-old girl, but she could not enjoy her childhood happily. She had a mission to complete and a clan to save. Yumiya waited for Itachi. She waited and prayed to Naka to help him find them. But he never did. By the second year living there, Yumiya realized that he never would. It was more likely that he and their parents believed that they were dead. She could just wait out the massacre, but that did not sit right with her. She had to get back to Konoha by herself before the massacre happened. That thought kept Yumiya awake many nights. Hurry, Yumiya! Sasuke cried, ripping Yumiya from her thoughts. Come on! Let's play together. Don't you want to play hide and seek before breakfast? Of course I do, she grumbled as she finished peeling the potato. But these potatoes are bigger than usual. Sasuke looked up at her with big puppy dog eyes and pouted. It was all thanks to Sancho's care that he was able to grow up into a healthy 6-year-old boy. After Yumiya begged Grandma Sancho to adopt Sasuke from the nasty matron and explained that he was her lost younger brother, Sancho adopted him without hesitation. He was so sickly from drifting down the river after the Nine-Tails attack and too young to eat the curry of life. Yumiya remembered holding him close that night near the kitchen fireplace, begging for him to survive. Miraculously, he did. Did you finish your chores, Sasuke? Sancho asked, stirring the curry in the large pot in the kitchen, preparing to open the shop. Of course I did, Sasuke cheered, counting down the things he did on his fingers. I made my bed, brushed my teeth. Did you sweep the front porch? Hey, it's Karashi's turn to do that. He's right, Grandma. I finished, Karashir stuttered as he entered the kitchen. Whose turn is it to peel the carrots, then? Sancho asked with a lifted brow. Oh, Sasuke sighed, looking at the crate of unpeeled carrots. I'm on it. Sasuke quickly got the crate and put it right next to Yumiya with the bucket ere the peelings go between them. Hardly anything is thrown away around here. The peels would be used to make a stock for whatever else they cooked that day and the curry. Yumiya insisted that they should serve things other than curry. Sancho's response was different dishes that had curry in it, like curry-filled bread and dumplings using the curry as filling. That was the only downside of living here. Curry for every meal. Please, let me help, Karashir said shyly, situating himself between Yumiya and Sasuke with a knife. He took a carrot from Sasuke's crate before peeling it. Watch your fingers, Sasuke. Do it just like this. I know. I know. See? Sasuke muttered, holding out his perfectly peeled carrot. Yumiya is the one who needs help. Look at those extra big potatoes. That's right. Help me, Karashur. Yumiya complained. Karashur laughed as he took a potato and peeled it in only a few seconds. Yumiya and Sasuke stared at his handiwork in amazement. Karashi's wood-carving skills were really paying off in their chores. He created all sorts of wooden figurines. He even carved Sasuke a wooden dinosaur for his birthday. Thanks to Karashur, Yumiya and Sasuke were able to complete their chores before breakfast. They put the peeled vegetables next to the counter. Sasuke ran outside jumping for joy. Yay! Hide and seek time. You're it, Karashur. Before Sasuke could run into the woods, they heard Sancho's call them all in for breakfast. Ah, Sasuke whined as he followed everyone inside. Sancho set the table on one closest to the kitchen. It was curry again with rice and miso soup. The plate with tomato slices on the side instead of miso was for Sasuke. It was a hearty breakfast for her growing grandchildren. Thanks for the food, they said in unison when they sat down and took a bite of their curry. It was flavorful and delicious as usual. The savoriness of the curry and the umami of the miso was a perfect combination. Sasuke hummed. Thanks for the tomato. It's perfect. Despite having curry every day, it was Sasuke's favorite dish. Especially with the tomato slices. Yumiya just ate it quietly. It was good, but too much of a good thing made it bland. Grandma? Sasuke asked with big puppy dog eyes. Can Yumiya and Karashur play hide and seek with me after breakfast? I know that they usually help open shop, but there is no one here at the door and it will only be for a little while. Sancho rubbed her chin in contemplation. We could go foraging while we are out, Karashur interjected. Yumiya nodded with him. I know that we are low on quite a few herbs and the crab traps should be full by now. Please. Pretty please? Sasuke begged. Sancho chuckled. Alright. Just for today. Yay! Sasuke cheered before running out the door. Yumiya's it. Hey, we have to clean up first. Yumiya called. But Sasuke had already disappeared into the woods. It's fine. I will handle it. You two have fun as well. Just help with this afternoon rush, okay? Okay, Kekkei. Yumiya already sensed where Sasuke was hiding, but she was at a loss with how to get to him. He was on top of a tree way off the trail. It was going to take hours to climb that tree and how was she going to get down after? Must be because of his Uchiha genes, Yumiya whispered to herself, walking with Karashur down the well-tread forest trail. The leaves from the trees blocked the sun, only small rays broke through. A small breeze flew past, causing a few leaves to fall. Yumiya jumped and caught one before placing it on her forehead, using her chakra to make it stick. I can never understand how you and Sasuke can do that with a leaf, Karashur said. Yumiya chuckled. It just takes practice. Karashur just shook his head. Do you think Sasuke is lost? Karashur asked, sounding a bit worried. Yumiya sensed Sasuke hopping from tree to tree above them, most likely had gotten bored waiting in his hiding spot. Doubt it. Shouldn't you be hiding? I did hide. Hiding behind the back door doesn't count. It worked on Sasuke. They arrived at their favorite spot by the river. There was a clearing full of different plants and herbs. Yumiya made sure to pick some while Karashur checked the crab traps. We got a few big ones this time. Yumiya nodded as she picked herbs by the riverbed. She heard rustling in the trees and knew that it was Sasuke taunting them before going into his new hiding spot. Don't you think Sasuke is hiding a little too well? Yumiya asked loud enough for him to hear. He gets better every time we play, Karashur replied, putting the crabs into his leather satchel. Okay, let's go back, Yumiya said. Sasuke is just too good, you win. Yes. Sasuke shouted as he hung upside down on a tree branch, his face peeking out of the leaves. I'll race you back. Last one back is a rotten egg. Yumiya laughed before breaking into a run with Karasher. Hey, I'm not ready! Sasuke shouted, struggling to climb down the tree. They all ran back to the shop as fast as they could. Of course, Sasuke won. The rest of the day was the usual backbreaking work at the shop. Yumiya and Karasher would wait tables while Sancho diligently worked in the kitchen with Sasuke as her little helper. Yumiya never thought she would ever become a waitress. In her past life, being a waitress was at the bottom of the list of jobs because of the lack of pay and tipping culture. Not that those concerns mattered now. Yumiya was neither paid for her work nor was tipping a thing in River Country. She was a penniless girl. Yumiya shook her head as she wiped down the wooden tables and fluffed the seat cushions. Having a place to stay and having a loving grandma like Sancho was enough. At least, that's what Yumiya reminded herself whenever the work felt a bit too daunting. Child labor was the only fault of living in this place, but she would take complaining customers over running into rogue ninjas deep in the woods any day. Her stomach began to growl, and she looked toward the screen front door. The evening rush recently ended, and she hoped that no one was going to come in. It was dinner time and Yumiya didn't want to wait for her evening curry. It was the best meal of the day, or that was her hunger pangs talking. Sadly, the door burst open. Is my darling Sancho around? She knew that white turban from anywhere. It was the old spice merchant from the market. He grinned at her before he sat himself at the table she had just cleaned. Yumiya did her best to hide her grimace, covering it with a placid smile. She was going to have to clean that table again. Welcome, Mr. Rakio. She's in the kitchen, Yumiya said. Oh, Rakio. What a surprise! Sancho cried, rushing out of the kitchen. Do you have the spices I ordered? Rakio chuckled, stroking his white beard. Darling, I would give you the world if I could. Of course I have the spices. Coriander seeds, turmeric, cumin, chili peppers. All spices you ever need to run this fantastic shop, Yumiya sighed to herself as she finished cleaning the tables. Rakio would come once in a blue moon and stay in their spare room. Other customers sometimes used the spare room as well, but they paid for it. Karasher, can you please get the room ready? Sancho called. Karasher was focused on sweeping the floor when Sancho's voice made him jump. Why yes, Grandma. Sancho sat across from Rakio and placed her hand under her chin, a gleam in her eyes. How long will you be staying? She asked. Rakio held her hand and sighed. Just for tonight, I'm afraid. Konoha finally opened its gates to Suna again. Was wondering when conflicts would settle. Konoha? Yumiya thought as she perked up. That ninja village? You know how dangerous Fire Country has been since the earthquake. There are two things more dangerous than ninjas, and that's rogue ninja and bandits. And they both increased in numbers, Sancho said, fanning herself. Rakio nodded, patting her hand in an attempt to calm her. Yes, but Konoha has recovered a lot since then and I have been meaning to resume trade there. Before Yumiya could listen anymore, Sancho turned to her. Yumiya, you don't need to be so curious about Konoha. It is a dangerous place, Sancho said. Now, go help Sasuke wash the dishes before serving yourself some dinner. Yumiya nodded before doing just that, grumbling to herself. Sasuke was washing dishes when Yumiya entered. He stood on a stool on his tippy toes, one pile of clean dishes to his left and an even higher pile of dirty plates to his right. The rest of the kitchen looked clean, so the dishes must have been the only thing that needed to be done before dinner. His eyes brightened as she walked to him. Finally, some help. Can you dry and put away the dishes? Sasuke pleaded with his puppy dog eyes. You know how much Grandma hates dishes on the drying rack. That's the plan, Yumiya said, rolling up her sleeves. She grabbed a cloth and began to dry and put away the clean dishes and utensils. She tried to listen in on what Sancho and Rakio were talking about, but the sound of the sink drowned out their whispers. What got you so curious? Sasuke asked as he scrubbed another plate. Yumiya sighed as she put away another dish. They were talking about Konoha, Yumiya whispered. Sasuke's eyes widened. Like in the stories you tell me at bedtime? They aren't just stories, Yumiya grumbled. Our family is out there in Konoha. Sasuke handed Yumiya another clean dish. Grandma and Karasher are our family. Our other family then. Sasuke stopped washing the dishes. If we have a whole other family in Konoha, why haven't they come looking for us? And why doesn't Grandma know? There were many times that Yumiya wanted to tell Sancho about her family in Konoha, but she saw the fear in her eyes whenever Konoha was mentioned. Not only that, Sancho was sadly much too old and weak to make the long journey over there even if she did want to go there. She did tell Karashir about her family in Konoha and he told her that it was best to go visit there when they were older and equipped for the journey. It was sensible, but the Uchiha clan did not have that long before the massacre. It's complicated, Yumiya said, and they left it at that. That night, Yumiya thought about nothing but Konoha, Itachi and their parents. How many more years would she let pass by without seeing them? She was so close to a solution. Just in the spare bedroom was her ticket back to Konoha, sleeping like a baby. She could not let this opportunity slip past her. Sasuke slept soundly next to her in his cotton futon. Yumiya slowly got out of bed and started to pack her patched satchel for the long journey. When Yumiya was done, she went and kissed Sasuke on the forehead. "I promise to come back for you," she whispered before tiptoeing into the hallway. She could hear Sancho's loud snores as she walked down the stairs and into the dining hall. She stopped at a painting that was on the wall. Yumiya was so surprised and happy that Sancho gave her painting supplies for her birthday. This was her first art piece since she was reincarnated. Yumiya was quite rusty, and she could nitpick all of her imperfections, but when she showed it to Sancho, all she saw was perfection. Yumiya smiled at the memory. It was one of the many happy memories she had made with her family. A part of her so desperately wanted to stay and forget about everything. Live happily as Sancho's granddaughter and grow up here. But that can never be. Are you going somewhere? Karashir asked from behind her. Yumiya jumped at Karashi's quiet entrance and turned to him. You scared me. Well? Yumiya straightened her back in an attempt to make herself seem threatening. I am going to Konoha, and you can't stop me. Karashir sighed. I knew this day will come. He handed her a pouch. Yumiya caught it and opened it. It was full of Rio. Thank you, Yumiya said as she held the pouch close. And no need to thank me. Just come back safe, Karashir said. Yumiya ran over and hugged him. Then she left and slipped into the spice merchant's wagon. She found an empty barrel to hide in. Yumiya was able to sneak into Rakio's wagon with relative ease and hid inside of one of the empty barrels. She fell asleep in the barrel in no time, and by the time she woke up, the wagon was already moving. I am so smart. I will be in Konoha in no time. It might be a week's journey, but she snagged enough curry buns for the journey if she rationed them right. Other than the crick in her neck from sleeping in the uncomfortable barrel, things were going relatively smoothly. Stop! She spoke too soon. She heard Sasuke shouting from outside of the wagon. Stop! I have little legs. Sasuke cried. The wagon came to a halt, the donkey pulling it making a frustrated bray. What's wrong, Sasuke? Did Sancho forget some spices again? Rakio asked. Yumiya is missing. I've been looking everywhere and I can't find her. Sancho's getting worried. My wagon is no place for hide and seek. I am sure she is hiding somewhere near home. Nah. I told you that I already looked and I am really good at hide and seek. This is no game. Please, Mr. Rakio. Can I search your wagon? Rakio sighed. Alright. We can do it together. Yumiya's breath hitched as she heard both Sasuke and Rakio climb into the wagon and start shifting through barrels. The dust from the spices fluttered into the air and infiltrated her nose. She tried her hardest not to sneeze. The sneeze kept coming and going, until... Achoo! I think I heard something, Rakio said. Sounded like a sneeze, Sasuke said. I think it came from this barrel. Sasuke, you idiot! Yumiya cried, jumping up from her hiding place, knowing that she had been caught. Aha! I got you! You are in big trouble, Yumiya, Sasuke said with his arms crossed. I can't believe you done this. This was my chance to go to Konoha. So? You would leave me to see our other family without me? Sasuke said, pouting. Yes. It's a long and dangerous journey. I was gonna come back for you. Yeah, right. You were just going to abandon me. Rakio put his hand on both Sasuke and Yumiya's shoulders before leading them off of his wagon. Now, children. You can have your argument somewhere else. It happened so fast. One moment, Rakio was scolding them and there was a knife through his neck, gagging as blood gushed out. He collapsed on the ground. Sasuke stared in shock and Yumiya screamed. Yumiya's Sharingan activated. Another knife came hurtling toward her and she dodged, thanks to the use of her Sharingan. The knife stuck to the wagon. I can't believe I missed. A man scoffed, walking onto the dirt road. He wore a black hood and wore a crooked smile. It was a bandit. Sasuke, run! Yumiya cried, but she was grabbed by the hair by another bandit. Yumiya! Sasuke cried, but he was grabbed by the scruff by the man. He tried to struggle, but he got punched in the stomach. The pool of Rakio's blood spread to Yumiya's feet and was yanked up to look at the assailant. She knew that blonde hair and golden eyes from anywhere. Naruto, she spat as she struggled under his tight grip. She thought he was gone for good since he ran away from the village years ago. She should have known that he would become a bandit. Shut up, twerp. Looks like today is your unlucky day and it's golden boy Naruto to you, he said, pulling her hair harder. The pain made tears in Yumiya's eyes, but they did not obstruct the vision of her Sharingan. Her knees buckled under his killing intent. Look at her funny eyes, boss. What do you want to do with them? That's the Sharingan, the head bandit said, licking his lips. Looks like we hit the jackpot, boy. Ninja clan eyes cost a lot of money in the black market. Who knows how much we would get for Uchiha eyes? Yumiya's whole body went cold. Was this how she and Sasuke were going to die? What about the boy's eyes? Naruto asked. We need to activate them. I heard that they awaken through suffering. Let's kill the girl and have the boy watch, the boss said. Everything came in slow motion as she watched Naruto take out his knife and prepare to slice her neck. She was going to die and there was nothing she could do. Yumiya hasn't done any ninja training. The most that she had ever done was stick a leaf on her forehead and climb trees. Nothing could prepare her for this. There was no way she could get out of this. Suddenly, pressure came into Yumiya's eyes and her eyes met Naruto's. He froze, looking at some unknown entity and began to his moment of distraction. His grip loosened from her hair and as if on impulse, Yumiya took the knife from Naruto's hands and thrusted it behind her before running toward Sasuke. Naruto, you idiot! The bandit shouted. A crow suddenly flew from the woods and attacked the man. Idiot! The crow cawed, clawing at the man's eyes. Sasuke kicked him in his groin and ran toward Yumiya. They both ran away into the woods, not looking back. They did not know how long they were running, nor in what direction. All Yumiya knew was that they were getting as far from the bandits as possible. By the time they stopped to catch their breath, all Yumiya could see was that they were deep in the woods, surrounded by trees. A cool breeze brushed past them and Yumiya shivered. I think we lost them, she panted, her hands on her knees. She looked at her hands and saw that there was blood on them. She trembled as the attack replayed in her mind. She didn't even know where she stabbed Naruto or if he was still alive. Sasuke went and hugged Yumiya, which broke her from her trance. I thought you were going to die, Sasuke cried as he tightened his grip. Yumiya looked down and noticed that his eyes were red as well, one tomo swirling inside of it. She hugged Sasuke back. I think we are safe now. It's okay, what are we going to do? Sasuke asked and looked around. I don't recognize these woods. Forward, Yumiya replied. We can only move forward. Yumiya and Sasuke continued on their journey. They wandered for what seemed like hours and the sun was slowly going down. They held each other's hands the whole way, making sure that they were close. Every rustle in the forest made Yumiya jump. The temperature was becoming even colder and droplets started to go down. They needed to find shelter before it rained harder. By the time they found a cave, it was pouring. The cave towered over them, its entrance covered in moss and vines. Yumiya felt a sense of foreboding, but it was better than standing in the rain. Come on. We can rest inside, Yumiya said, tugging Sasuke along. They walked into the cave and there was hardly a sound. Only the sound drips from stalactites. That was when they reached the end of a cave where there were tree trunks that grew into the form of a prison. Inside of it was a boy huddled in the corner. "What in the world?" Yumiya asked. "Don't come any closer," the boy said with a sniffle. "Who put you in there?" Sasuke asked. "Won't you just listen?" The boy shouted, his voice quickening. "Kill! I want to kill," he started muttering, a glowing red substance beginning to spread across his body, turning his skin gray. He started laughing hysterically. Yumiya and Sasuke backed away at that. "Maybe we should find another cave," Yumiya said, before she turned to run. He was so fast. The boy punched through his tree prison and was about to punch Sasuke but stopped. Staring into Sasuke's eyes, he began to calm down. "What? How?" he asked, looking down at his hands and turning back to normal. Yumiya was prepared to run. "Let's get out of here," she said, grabbing Sasuke's hand. "You don't have to tell me twice," Sasuke said. "Please don't go." The boy cried, getting on his knees to bow. "I never thought there could be a cure to my rages. But when I looked into your eyes, I calmed down. That never happened before. Please take me with you." "How about, no," Yumiya said. "You attacked us." Sasuke said. "I couldn't control it until now," the boy pleaded. "I'm sorry for attacking you. I'm Yugo." "What's yours?" "It doesn't matter," Yumiya said, leaving the cave. "Let's find another cave, Sasuke." "Wait!" Yugo cried, tears in his eyes. "Please! We don't have time for this. We need to get to Konoha," Yumiya said. "Konoha? I know the way." "I can take you," Yugo said. "We can't go to Konoha. We have to go home," Sasuke interjected. "Do you know the way to Sancho's curry shop?" Sasuke asked. Yugo shook his head. "That settles it. If you take us to Konoha, I will forgive you for trying to attack us. Deal?" Yugo beamed. Over the last few days, Yumiya had realized one important fact about Yugo: he was a Disney princess. Animals, especially birds, would crowd around him. They would rest on his shoulders and cuddle with him. Sometimes, he would whisper to them and laugh as if they were telling him jokes. He reminded her of Snow White, and it was her inspiration to draw him. That was how she started her day, sketching Yugo in her sketchbook as he whispered to the birds. His rages were a rare occurrence. He would always tense up and start breathing really hard with his mutterings of killing. When he showed those telltale signs, Yumiya would activate her Sharingan to calm him down. Sasuke was still having trouble trying to activate it at will. Honestly, Yumiya secretly thought his rages were kind of amusing. He reminded her of a child about to rage quit on his computer monitor. Sure, he was really strong and could snap her like a toothpick, but he always apologized profusely whenever he calmed down. "We are close to the border," Yugo said as he petted a bird on his shoulder as it ruffled its feathers in delight. They all sat around a snuffed fire. Sasuke was still eating his berries. Yugo and Yumiya already finished their breakfast. Sasuke had always been a slow eater. "That's good. How far are we from Konoha?" Yumiya asked, finishing up her sketch. The bird on Yugo gave a little tweet. "It is just a few hours away from the border. Let's get this over with," Sasuke grumbled, resigned to his fate on this journey. He walked over to Yumiya, who was doing her finishing touches on her drawing. "Why is Yugo in a dress?" Sasuke asked with a brow raised. Yumiya grinned with pride. The sketch was of Yugo with his arm gracefully stretched out with birds perched on it, surrounded by woodland creatures. Of course he would be wearing Snow White's signature dress. Why not? Yugo is a princess at heart. How else would he be able to talk to animals? "I've been called many things, but this is the first time ever being called princess," Yugo said, walking up to them. He looked down at the drawing and smiled. "I like it. Never seen that type of outfit before." "Well, of course. It's Snow White's dress," Yumiya said, putting her sketchbook away. "Let's get going. I want to get to Konoha as soon as possible." They cleaned up and resumed their journey. Yumiya used her sensing ability to make sure they didn't run into anyone as they ran through the forest. When they made it to the border, Yumiya was out of breath. She doesn't know how Yugo and Sasuke do it. In front of them was a barbed wire fence. I thought the country's border would be more guarded, Yumiya said, sensing no other people around. The border between nations is not that guarded. At least where the birds show me. I walk across borders all the time, Yugo said. He guided them to a small hole in the fence big enough for them to crawl through. Good thing we have you, Yugo. We would have had to pay who knows how much to get into Fire Country without you, Sasuke said as they all crawled through the hole in the fence. Just like that, they were in Fire Country. Yumiya felt giddy as they continued through the thick forest. They made sure to avoid the main road and villages along the way. Yumiya felt few chakra signatures in their journey. Luckily, no one saw their band of 3 as interesting. Forests in the day and forests at night. They were surrounded. Other than the hard ground when she went to sleep by the fire at night, the nights were as peaceful as the days. It might have been just her, but the air felt different compared to river country. The tree leaves seemed more vibrant and she could smell the sweet moss that grew on them. It felt almost homey. Yumiya was always the first to get tired, so she would ask Yugo for a ride. She told him that she would forgive for almost attacking them if he gave her a ride. He complied immediately. Once Yumiya was on his back, they decided to try tree hopping. Sasuke got the hang of it immediately, being the prodigy that he was. Doing this, they covered a lot more ground. Who taught you how to tree hop? Yumiya asked, clinging for her life with how fast they were going. My mom taught me a lot about living on my own before she died. Oh. I'm sorry for your loss. Been alone ever since, but the animals take good care of me. Yumiya smiled at that. I'm happy they do. Our journey would not have been as smooth without them. Suddenly, she sensed something familiar. The same energy that Naka emitted whenever she appears. It felt dark, but also warm. Comforting. Beckoning. Stop! Yumiya shouted. What is it? Sasuke asked. Yugo looked at her expectantly. I have a feeling. Go left. Yumiya shouted. Why do we have to make such a detour? Sasuke asked. Because I said so. Who was the one who changed your diapers? Me. Wasn't Grandma Sancho. Now come on. Yumiya snapped. That got Sasuke quiet real quick as he followed them. After what felt like an hour, they stumbled upon an old shrine. The buildings would looked rotted and in the center was a statue of a fox that looked like it was protecting it. One of its eyes was black with a red lotus pinwheel in the iris. No way, Yumiya said as she walked up to it. She thought it would have taken years. Maybe after training to be a ninja or something to begin searching. Yumiya spent many a night wondering how to begin her search for Naka's eyes. But there it was, stuck inside a statue that lost its relevance long ago. Forgotten and vulnerable to her. Yumiya got off of Yugo and climbed up on the fox statue. Yumiya. Yugo called, looking confused. What are you doing? What if this place is booby-trapped? Sasuke called. If this place was, I am pretty sure the traps would be too old to even activate, Yumiya said, waving her hand away. She reached for the eyes and it came out without much resistance. Yumiya looked around and waited for something to happen. Nothing did. See? Told you, caw. The sound of a crow made Yumiya lose her balance and fall off of the statue. Thankfully, Sasuke was there on the bottom to catch her. Thanks, Yumiya said as she got off of him. What are you going to do with that? Sasuke asked, looking at the orb in Yumiya's hand. I don't know. But I'll figure it out. Before she could put it in her satchel, a crow with the lotus markings appeared and landed on her shoulder. Give, it rasped. Yumiya knew that it worked for Naka based on its markings, so she gave it to the crow. It ate it before flying away. Okay, that was weird, Sasuke said. Thank you for watching this video.